He was a broke, betrayed young man, until a maid and her child changed his life forever. But what he did next shocked everyone, including the world of billionaires. Watch closely, because this story will teach you a lesson money cannot buy, and the ending will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this incredible story, do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. I was not always a billionaire. I was once a hungry boy, sleeping under a leaking tin roof, counting raindrops like unpaid debts. My father left behind silence. My mother left behind courage. At 17, I worked as a cleaner in a glass tower I now own. I remember the cold marble floors, the scent of polish, the sharp laughter of executives who never looked down long enough to see me. Failure followed me like a shadow. My first business collapsed. Partners betrayed me. Bank accounts bled dry. One night, while I stood outside my own office building, evicted and humiliated, I saw her, a maid. Thin hands, tired eyes, but dignity that outshone the city lights. She held her toddler close. The child trembled in the winter wind and whispered, "Please, hide me in your blanket." Her blanket was too small. Her salary was too small. Her world was too small. But her heart was not. She looked at me, a broken man in an expensive suit, and offered half her bread. I felt shame burn inside my chest. She told me, "Loss is a teacher. Pride is a thief." I began again, not with investors, with integrity. She stitched my torn confidence, the way she stitched her child's worn clothes. When banks refused me, she believed me. When fear whispered surrender, she whispered faith. Years of sleepless nights followed. Cold offices, empty pockets, relentless work, until the same executives who ignored the janitor stood to applaud the founder. Today, my name sits on skyscrapers. My signature moves markets. But my greatest wealth is the woman who once shared half her bread. Yesterday, at a charity gala in that same tower, I saw a frightened child hiding behind a cleaning cart. The same whisper trembled through the hall, and I knew what I was about to do would shock them. Ali walked away from the crystal chandeliers and the polished applause. My shoes echoed against the marble that once chilled my bare hands. The child's eyes were wide, dark with the same fear I once carried. His mother stood nearby, head lowered, uniform pressed but dignity trembling. Guests stared at me. Board members whispered, "A billionaire does not kneel," they say. But I knelt. I removed my tailored jacket, the one stitched in Italy, worth more than her monthly wage, and wrapped it around the child. Gasps rippled through the hall. The boy clutched the fabric, as if it were armor. I felt my throat tighten. I asked his mother her name. She struggled to answer. I recognized that silence. It was the silence of people who are used to being unseen. I stood, took the microphone meant for investors, and told them the truth. I told them about hunger, about betrayal, about the maid who fed a stranger when he had nothing left but shame. I told them she was now my wife. She stood at the edge of the hall, still uncomfortable with spotlights, yet stronger than any empire I built. The room shifted. Power changed shape. I announced a fund for every worker in every building I owned. Education for their children. Homes without leaking roofs. Warm blankets without whispered pleas. Some investors frowned. Profits would dip. But I remembered her words. Loss is a teacher. Pride is a thief. If wealth cannot protect the trembling, it is poverty disguised. Applause rose slowly. Not for my money, but for the mirror I forced them to face later that night. When the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, my wife held my hand, the same way she did when I was a man with nothing. She smiled softly and said, "This is only the beginning." And as I looked at the city below, I realized the greatest test of my life was still ahead. Their headlines came at dawn. Some praised me. Some called me foolish. A billionaire who chose compassion over profit. By noon, my stock price trembled. Board members requested an emergency meeting. Their faces were tight. Their smiles rehearsed. They warned me. Investors might withdraw. Expansion might stall. Competitors might strike. Fear tried to crawl back into my chest. I remembered cold nights, empty pockets, her steady voice. That evening, I walked into our modest kitchen. She was stirring soup, the scent of garlic and cumin filling the air. Not a palace, not a mansion, just warmth. She looked at my tired eyes and placed her hand over mine. "We built this from truth," she said. "If it falls, we will build again." Her faith did not shake, so mine could not either. The next morning, I did the unthinkable. I signed away a portion of my personal shares. To secure the worker fund permanently, gasps followed. Advisors protested. But something unexpected happened. Messages flooded in. Employees wrote about dignity restored. Young graduates asked to work for a company that valued humanity over margins. Customers chose us, not for price. For purpose our profits dipped, then steadied, then rose stronger than before. The market adjusted, but more importantly, so did I. I realized success was never the skyscraper. It was the foundation beneath it. Yet just as stability returned, an old rival resurfaced. The same man who once betrayed me now controlled a powerful consortium. He smiled during interviews, but his eyes promised war. A hostile takeover loomed. My board panicked. My advisors calculated surrender. That night, I stood by the window, city lights flickering like fragile hopes. She joined me. Quiet, steady. "I hid you in my blanket once," as she whispered. "Now let us see how strong you have become." The storm was coming. And this time, I was no longer afraid. Their takeover bid arrived at sunrise. Cold numbers, sharp signatures, a quiet declaration of war. My rival offered a price so high that even loyalty began to tremble. Board members avoided my eyes. Greed has a scent. I could almost taste it in the room. If they voted yes, everything we built would turn into another machine. That consumed the week. For a moment, the old fear returned. The boy under the leaking roof. The janitor invisible in the tower. Failure whispered, "You will lose again." That night, I sat alone in the office, where I once polished floors. The city lights blinked below, indifferent and distant. Then she walked in. No diamonds, no designer gown, just the same quiet strength. She placed an old, folded blanket on my desk, the one she once used to hide her shivering child. "I kept it," she said, "to remind us who we are." My hands trembled as I touched the worn fabric. It smelled faintly of soap and years of sacrifice. "You are not fighting for control," as she whispered. "You are fighting for conscience." Her words cleared the fog in my mind. The next morning, I called an all-employee assembly. Not executives, not shareholders, workers, cleaners, guards, assistants, engineers. I told them the truth. A vote was coming. The company could change forever. Silence filled the hall, then something unexpected happened. One by one, employees stood up. They pledged their shares. Small portions, hard-earned savings, enough to tip the balance. The vote ended in our favor. My rival's smile faded, the empire remained ours. But victory felt different this time. Softer, deeper. As the crowd cheered, I searched for her. She stood in the back, holding that old blanket. And I realized the greatest wealth I protected was not the company, it was the promise woven into that blanket. The promise that no child under my roof would ever whisper for warmth again. After the vote, reporters chased me. Cameras flashed like restless lightning. They asked about strategy, about dominance, about power. I spoke about responsibility. Some understood. Many did not. Weeks passed. The storm settled. But a quiet challenge remained. Growth demanded expansion. Expansion demanded risk. Advisors urged me to enter markets where labor was cheap and laws were weaker. Profit margins would soar. I visited one of those factories overseas. The air was thick with heat. Metal clanged endlessly. Children carried boxes too heavy for their thin arms. The smell of sweat and dust pressed against my lungs. I saw myself in those eyes. Small, determined, forgotten. That night in the hotel room, I could not sleep. The contract sat on the desk. One signature could double my fortune. My phone buzzed. A message from her. A simple photo. Our son, now older, sleeping peacefully under a new blanket. No fear on his face. Only trust. Below the photo, she wrote, "Build something he can be proud of." My hand hovered over the pen. If I refused the deal, shareholders would rage. Expansion would slow. If I accepted, I would betray the boy I once was. Morning light began to seep through the curtains. The world waited for my decision, and as I stared at my reflection in the glass, I understood that true wealth is measured in the lives it refuses to exploit. My hand moved away from the pen. I tore the contract in half. The sound was soft, but it felt louder than applause. When I returned home, share prices had already begun to fall. Angry messages flooded my phone. Some called me naive. Others called me reckless. I sat at the dining table in silence. The weight of responsibility pressed hard on my ribs. She poured tea slowly. Steam rose between us like a quiet prayer. "Are you afraid?" she asked gently. "Yes," I answered. "Not of poverty, not of failure, but of disappointing those who believed in me." She reached across the table and placed my hand over her heart. It beat steady, unshaken. "You taught the world strength," she said. "Now teach them patience." The next weeks were brutal. Investors withdrew. Media questioned my leadership. Competitors mocked my ethics. Yet something else began to grow. Young entrepreneurs wrote letters. Parents thanked us. Workers in distant cities heard about the torn contract. They trusted us. Slowly, partnerships formed with companies that valued fairness over speed. Progress was slower, but cleaner. Our profits returned. Not explosive, but honest. One evening, as I walked through our headquarters, I saw framed photographs along the wall. Workers, families, children wrapped in bright blankets. I felt something deeper than pride. I felt peace. But just as calm settled in my chest, an urgent call came from our legal team. A powerful coalition of corporations had filed a coordinated lawsuit against us. They claimed we were disrupting the market. The battle was not over. And this time, it would test more than my wealth, it would test my soul. Courtrooms replaced boardrooms. Cold benches, muted whispers, sharp suits hiding sharper intentions. They accused me of unfair influence, of manipulating sentiment, of threatening established order. Their lawyers spoke smoothly, polished, precise, ruthless. For a moment, doubt crept in again. What if I had gone too far? What if kindness was weakness in disguise? During a recess, I stepped outside. The air smelled of rain on concrete. Grey clouds pressed low over the city. She stood beside me, holding an umbrella, though it had not yet begun to rain. "You look tired," as she said softly. "I am," I replied. She adjusted my tie, the same way she once folded that old blanket. "Remember," she whispered, "you are not here to defeat them. You are here to defend what is right." Inside the courtroom, our turn came. I did not speak of numbers. I spoke of people, of workers given education, of children no longer hiding from cold, of profit that did not require suffering. Silence followed. Even the judge leaned forward. Weeks passed before the verdict. Every day felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Finally, the decision arrived. We were cleared of all charges. More than that, new regulations were proposed, inspired by our model. The coalition's power weakened. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I searched for her in the crowd. She was there, eyes shining, umbrella still in her hand. Rain began to fall at last. This time, no child whispered for a blanket. And as the city blurred under silver drops, I realized the greatest legacy I could leave was not measured in billions, it was measured in courage passed forward. Years moved quietly after the trial. Not easy, not perfect, but steady. our company became a place where ambition and conscience walked side by side. Young leaders rose through the ranks, not hungry for power, but hungry for purpose. One evening, I was invited to speak at a small community center in the same neighborhood where my mother once struggled to pay rent. The walls were cracked, the chairs were mismatched, but the room was full. I stepped onto the modest stage. In the front row, I saw a boy in worn shoes. Holding his sister's hand, his eyes were sharp, restless, full of questions. I told them about failure, about betrayal, about the night a maid shared half her bread. I told them success is not owned. It is earned daily, through character. After the talk, the boy approached me. His voice shook. "Sir," he asked, "what if the world keeps pushing you down?" I bent slightly, so I could look directly into his eyes. "The world will push," I said, "but you must choose what pushes back. Anger or integrity?" He nodded slowly. As I turned to leave, I saw my wife near the doorway. She was watching the children. Not me. Always them. In that moment, I understood something deeper. I had built companies. She had built people. And as we walked into the cool night air, hand in hand, a new idea began to form in my mind. An academy. A foundation beyond business. Something that would outlive us both. The thought both excited and frightened me. Because true legacy requires one final sacrifice. It required letting go. Not of wealth, but of control. The academy would need funding beyond comfort, beyond applause. It would need trust placed in others. Advisors warned me again. Diversifying too much, risking stability, surrendering authority. I listened. Then I remembered the blanket. I announced that half of my personal fortune would seed the foundation. Gasps returned. History was repeating itself. Shareholders questioned my sanity. Friends questioned my future. That night, I walked through our quiet home. The walls held laughter. The floors held memories. Fear brushed against me once more. What if this time I miscalculated? What if generosity finally broke us? She found me in the hallway. "You are thinking too loudly," she said with a faint smile. "I am risking everything again," I answered. She shook her head gently. "No, you are planting everything." Construction began months later. A modest campus at first. Brick, glass, light. Children from forgotten streets enrolled. Scholarships replaced excuses. Mentors replaced doubt. On opening day, I stood before the gates. The sign bore no corporate logo. Only a simple name. Her name. Tears gathered in her eyes. She tried to protest. I did not let her. "This began with you," I said quietly. Applause echoed across the courtyard. But I barely heard it. Because in the distance, near the entrance, I noticed a familiar figure. An older man, well-dressed, watching carefully. The rival who once tried to destroy me. He was not smiling this time. He was waiting. And something in his expression told me this chapter was not finished. He approached slowly, not with arrogance, but with something heavier. Regret. The crowd thinned as he reached me. For years, his name had felt like a wound. Now it felt like a question. I was wrong, he said quietly. No cameras. No audience. Just truth between two aging men. I chased dominance, he continued. You chased meaning. His voice lacked its old sharpness. He told me his empire was profitable, but hollow. Executives loyal to money, not to mission. Children who admired wealth, not character. I came to see what you built, he said, glancing at the academy gates. Behind us, laughter echoed. Students running across fresh grass. Teachers guiding them gently. I studied his face. The lines were deeper. The pride thinner. Why are you here? I asked. He hesitated. To learn, he answered. The word surprised me more than any laureate ever had. For a moment, old anger tried to rise. Memories of betrayal, of sleepless nights. But I felt her hand slide into mine warm. Steady. The past loosened its grip. Then walk with me, I said. We stepped through the gates together. Students looked up, curious but unafraid. He listened as I explained the curriculum. Ethics beside economics. Compassion beside competition. At the courtyard fountain, he stopped. Can a man change this late? He asked. I thought of the boy under the leaking roof, of the maid with half a loaf of bread, of the torn contract. Yes, I replied softly, if he is willing to lose what made him powerful. He nodded slowly, and as we stood there, I sensed another turning point approaching. Because transformation demands a cost, the cost came quietly. Not in money, not in fame, but in humility. He joined the academy as a mentor, not as a founder, not as a ruler, but as a learner. The students watched. Some whispered, some laughed, but all learned something rare. Even power can bend toward goodness. I watched her from the courtyard. Her eyes caught mine. A soft smile told me everything. That love, patience, and courage had carried us farther than ambition ever could. Years passed. The academy grew, but it never outgrew its purpose. Children left with knowledge and heart. Workers gained dignity and respect. Families no longer feared hunger or cold. The city itself began to shift, one small act at a time, toward empathy and justice. My former rival became an advocate, not of money, but of mentoring and integrity. He learned that power without conscience is empty, but conscience without courage is wasted. And I learned the hardest lesson of all. Success is meaningless if it does not uplift others. We returned often to the blanket, the small, worn fabric that had once held a trembling child. It was a symbol now, not of fear, but of hope. I understood at last that wealth is not counted in zeros. It is measured in hands held, in trust restored, in lives changed quietly, bravely, with love. And as the sun set over the city, painting skyscrapers gold, I whispered a truth I had learned the hard way. The greatest fortune a man can earn is the courage to act rightly, the wisdom to love, and the humility to serve. Because a life lived in kindness even in the face of betrayal and hardship, will always shine brighter than gold. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story. If it moved you, share it, comment below, and remind someone you are never alone.